6 feet, 2 inches tall, and so authentic. This German medieval sword rivals the ones found in museums. It is a must for the serious weapons connoisseur and will become the treasured centerpiece of their collection. Remember, this handmade sword is not for the faint of heart, as great Landsknecht swords were wielded by only the strongest and most fearless chosen frontline Swiss and German soldiers of the Middle Ages. Its main purpose was to down charging horsemen and cut off incoming pikeheads. Wrought iron and steel has been worked to duplicate the design of an original piece now in private collection. This handmade Landsknecht sword has a fierce, functional flamberg, wavy high-carbon steel blade over 4.5 feet long and forged over hot coals. It has an especially appealing design with a hand-worked circular guard with joined rings at front and back along with swirled wrought iron guards. A true masterpiece from Ritter Steel.
Or, so says the catalog description. Let's take a closer look, shall we?
Item 2630 in the Ritter Steel catalog. Some basic information about the sword. The overall length is 75.5 inches. Blade length of 39 5/8 inches. The crossguard is 15 7/8 inches by 6 inches. The weight is 14 pounds, 11.5 ounces. It comes with a sharp edge. Point of balance is 4 inches from the crossguard. Thickness of the blade is 5.8 millimeters with a small distal taper to 4.8 millimeters. The width is 50.1 millimeters. The grip length is 17.5 inches. The pommel is peened. The retail price for the sword is $498.
The main point to take away from the specifications is that this sword is very, very heavy. Compared to similar swords, it's probably 3 to 5 pounds heavier, and I'm certain that it has a lot to do with the thick blade and the wrought iron hilt furniture, but this sword fills a certain niche, and that is providing an ornate version of a Zweihänder. Now, I've looked at similar two-handed swords from Hanway and certainly from Albion, and while they're very light and they're beautiful in their own respects, they just don't have the frills, and that's what this sword has, the frills. So let's take a closer look at all of these aspects in detail. I feel this sword was designed first and foremost to just make people's jaws drop, and it's certainly impressive enough to achieve that response. There's almost too much to take in, but this sword meets most of the requirements I would have for a Zweihänder. It's large, almost oversized, has the nice flamberg blade, which is actually surprisingly hard to find in a production sword, has the parrying hooks, which is the secondary guard, and a nice leather wrapped ricasso with a sturdy handle and a uniquely ornate crossguard that's, well, it's just worthy of the German High Middle Ages. This sword is not too dissimilar from Zweihänders you might see in a museum.
So let's take a close look at the various parts of the sword. The flamberg blade is a little thick, but it has a consistent pattern down the length. There seems to be a slight twist in the blade, which is unfortunate. This is likely from either an improperly quenched blade or as a result of how it was stored, and I don't know that it's consistent with all the Ritter Landsknechts they've produced. The parry hooks are quite large, and they're not sharpened, which is good, because they're not really supposed to be. The leather wrapping for both the ricasso and the handle seem to be fairly low quality leather, and there are a few nicks, however, they are solidly applied. The crossguard is wrought iron, which has a large ring guard and spiral decorative frills. The handle, quite long at 17.5, bears the weight of the rest of the sword quite well, and I have no real concerns with the construction. The pommel is type T3, and the finish on it covers the peen.
This is where the Ritter Landsknecht begins to falter. It's just too heavy. Now, the high carbon blade is well tempered enough to be strong and flexible, and it's sharp. It's got about a butter knife sharpness to it. The edge bevel is rather steep to meet the full thickness of the blade, but in the end, it's hard to speak to the functionality of this sword, which was designed for frontline fighters as part of a large army. And I don't know that cut tests are really going to prove its effectiveness, as historically it was more likely to go up against pikes and horses. So in the end, I feel the only way I can really answer the functionality piece is by saying this. This sword was constructed using proper techniques that make it usable and not just a wall hanger. However, I feel due to the weight, it's just too heavy to really be wieldable. And it's probably better suited for a parade sword of sorts. Something of a good, rugged, solid display piece while not falling too far into the SLO category. I am really fond of this sword, more so than I expected to be, and I feel that the lack of functionality is something that I was less concerned with, as I never expected to have a use for this sword in any real functional sense. So maybe it's my tempered expectations, but I feel this sword is really something rather great. However, because of the weight and the impact that has on the sword as a whole, I feel it necessary to lower my score for this sword for objectivity's sake.
The Ritter Steel German Landsknecht. 3 out of 5.